everyone! Ash here. Today I wanted to make just a quick little video to talk about something that I find pretty interesting about Dragon Ball. As most of you probably know, Dragon Ball is the anime/manga series mostly written by Akira Toriyama, also mostly drawn, illustrated by Akira Toriyama, that started all the way back in the 80s, and then it kind of ended at the end of Z, and then we got the GT, which was kind of a sequel, but not really. I mean, it was anime only, so it's not really canon. And now, finally, in the last decade or so, after a long wait, we finally got an actual, revival sequel in Dragon Ball Super, neither here or there. And of course, it's mostly known as the pioneer of battle action shonen anime and manga, so it's really focused on battles and power levels and energy blasts and lots of action fighting. At least that's the general consensus on what Dragon Ball is and is supposed to be, especially if you consider the Western point of view. Where in a lot of places we got the sequel anime Dragon Ball Z first, which is really focused on action. Most of y'all probably already know that. What I do want to point out that is a bit interesting is something about the original Dragon Ball that maybe most of you also know, but haven't really thought about all that deeply. And as I was reading it, I found it to be pretty interesting. Because here's the thing. I think a lot of other Dragon Ball fans, I don't think I'm alone in this situation. I got into Dragon Ball as a fairly young kid, and that was through, television and catching episodes daily, and also, seeing a lot of supplementary stuff, as so many people my age tend to do, so, lots of YouTube, lots of internet stuff, lots of video games. So, despite me very much enjoying Dragon Ball, having enjoyed Dragon Ball since I was maybe 10, 11 years old, I am not quite sure, I don't think I have ever fully consumed, destroyed Dragon Ball from start to finish. I vicariously experienced that through Dragon Ball Xenoverse and some other video games and lots of YouTube videos. And also, just catching episodes on TV, because there were periods of my life where I was catching up with episodes that were coming out. And by coming out, I mean obviously rerunning. I am not old enough to have actually watched Dragon Ball at release. This is mostly a retroactive thing in my case. And I think most of us are like this. That's how most of us got into Dragon Ball. Especially considering the original pre-Z Dragon Ball wasn't ever aired in the US for the longest time. So I believe most of us, or at least a lot of us, just ended up catching the series in the middle of its story and just kind of keeping up from there and filling in the blanks whenever possible. So I wanted to change that. So I decided to finally sit down and start reading the original Dragon Ball manga by Akira Toriyama all the way back from the 80s. And something that I find very interesting is that it's so weird in the most interesting way possible. I think a lot of you know that because, again, lots of Dragon Ball fans, even the ones who haven't consumed the original series, tend to know the broad strokes, and they know it's geared towards a more, I don't want to say, it's not even a younger audience necessarily, it's just more comedic. The story clearly doesn't take itself too seriously. I believe at a certain point, the original plan was to just end the story after they first get all of the Dragon Balls. So it was going to be a short serialized manga, just kind of a change of pace for Toriyama after Dr. Slump, because that was tiring him out a lot from what I could gather from research and stuff. So Dragon Ball was mostly kind of almost a parody of Journey to the West, the old Chinese tale. That's weirdly good as well. I recommend watching the overly sarcastic production videos on Journey to the West because they shine a very interesting light on that story because it's weirdly quality to this day. Neither here or there, but basically Dragon Ball was originally meant to be just a parody of Journey to the West, and it's a very silly, very horny parody of Journey to the West. And when I say horny, I mean horny. Swear to God, this manga would not fly today. It would not. It disrespects so many cultural conventions as far as treating women decently goes nowadays. It's kind of an impressive little piece of history in that sense. It's a weird manga. They also just do not care about the fourth wall at all. It's broken multiple times. There's no intent on keeping internal consistency as far as the in-story universe goes, because it's just supposed to be funny. It's just supposed to be a comedy, which is something that, of course, they would later change because they want the stories to have stakes and stuff. So you better believe these characters are real, at least as far as their own conception of real goes. And, well, yeah, it's fairly common knowledge. I went into it expecting a more comedic, silly story from the start than what I'm used to from, Dragon Ball Z and whatnot. It didn't really hit me just how much less interested in story building, maybe not even story building, but like lore, stakes in general, this manga really is. It just doesn't fucking care. It's fucking lunatic. It's funny. It's a funny manga, but not really in that kind of like laugh it loud, haha, that's hilarious kind of way, at least in my opinion. Humor is subjective after all. But what it is it's almost ironically funny because due to culture and whatnot, when we think of Dragon Ball, we think of Dragon Ball Z and think of the insanely action-packed fights with lots of violence and lots of training and very insanely high stakes and whatnot. But in these first few stories of the original Dragon Ball, and I do know from like osmosis and stuff that it's more of a gradual change. I mean, Dragon Ball Z is where things really start getting going with life and we finding out what a Saiyan is. That's like a very hard point, but even then we have like the Piccolo saga before that, and that's already kind of like nudging onto something a little more serious. So it is a bit of a gradual change, but especially for the first few chapters. I'm on chapter 12 right now, so not very far at all into the story, and really don't expect it. It's really hard to put it into words because I can just tell you, oh, it's weird and wacky and funny and okay, but it's the process of actually reading it that is so weirdly fascinating because you start like thinking about the consequences and the stakes. It's like there's this one chapter where they fight a gang that is led by anthropomorphic bunny man who can turn people into carrots by touching them. And first of all, this guy would beat pretty much every character ever as long as they don't have a weapon. So like Broly, Beerus, who fucking cares? This man can turn you into a carrot and eat you. Like at will, just by touching you. Okay, I guess people can use energy less, but now I'm overthinking here, but that's the point. It makes me overthink in the most hilarious and interesting way possible. And when they beat this guy, here's the thing. They don't actually defeat him. Goku just uses his staff to like extend all the way up to the moon and just leave the guy up in the moon. For some reason, he can breathe there. And, gee, I wonder what happened to him when... You see my point? There's such a lack of concern for consequences in power levels and scaling, keeping stuff balanced. It's just kind of an off-the-wall silly manga that's gonna have one horny joke per chapter at the very fucking least. And it just kind of wants to make you laugh and be silly, and like a short little silly manga that ended up becoming the biggest media franchise Japan has ever offered to us, I guess besides maybe Pokemon and Hello Kitty. Whatever. By the way, yeah, for whatever reason, there are anthro characters running around all the time in this comic. Like, they show up a lot, and it's never really explained. It's not like Saiyans or Namekians where eventually there's kind of an explanation. No, they're just sort of there. There are animal people running around. Some of them can transform. Don't question it. I don't think you're supposed to question it. It's weirdly fascinating how just through time and I guess Toriyama getting bored or maybe interested in some other things, we basically got battle shonen as we understand it today, because that wasn't really a thing before Dragon Ball Z. Dragon Ball Z basically birthed that genre, so Naruto, Hunter x Hunter, Yu Yu Hakusho, any other shonen battle anime kind of basically owes its existence to Dragon Ball. And it's just kind of weird to think about reality where Dragon Ball just didn't take that direction and the entire landscape of manga just ends up entirely different.